It's my pleasure to introduce Dr. Lee Galuska. She's a nurse leader with more than 30 years of experience in clinical, educational, and administrative roles. She is currently the Executive Director of Nursing Practice, Education, and Research in the UCLA Health Center for Nursing Excellence. In her role, she oversees professional development of more than 4,500 nurses, academic affiliations, the nursing research and evidence-based practice programs, magnet recognition program, CNS practice, and multiple clinical programs. She is also an adjunct faculty member of the UCLA School of Nursing. Dr. Galuska has spent most of her career in Connecticut before relocating to Los Angeles in 2013. She received her PhD in nursing with a focus on nursing leadership development from the University of Connecticut and her master's in nursing administration from the University of Hartford. She has published widely and presented on the subjects of nursing leadership development and nurses' experience with meaning and joy in work practice. She has held leadership positions in numerous professional organizations and is currently on the board of the Association of California Nurse Leaders. Lee is also instrumental in the study that ACNL is going to be conducting on our Outcomes of Learning for the Foundations program. With Lee's involvement in the Nurse Leadership Development Program and the Research Committee, she's perfect for taking a lead role in this study. So with that, I would like to turn it over to Dr. Lee Galuska.
Well, thank you, Kim, for that very nice introduction. And thanks, everyone, for joining us today as we talk about nurses' experiences with meaning and joy in their practice and what we can do as nurse leaders to create the conditions where we all can flourish as nurses. So I have no financial relationships, no conflicts of interest to report. And really, what I'd like to begin with, the story starts with Don Berwick, who was the president of the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, or IHI, and he and his colleagues proposed that improving the U.S. healthcare system was going to require simultaneous pursuit of three aims: improving the experience of care, improving the health of populations, and reducing per capita costs. So the intent of that triple aim was to guide the redesign of healthcare systems and their transition to population health. So as a result, the triple aim has been adopted as a set of principles for health system reform around the world. And the successful achievement of the triple aim requires highly effective healthcare organizations. And we know that the backbone of any healthcare organization to be effective is an engaged and productive workforce. But the triple aim didn't talk about the critical role of the workforce in healthcare transformation. So in 2015, 7 years later, Lucian Leath and colleagues from the National Patient Safety Foundation proposed a modification to the triple aim to acknowledge the importance of nurses, physicians, and all employees finding joy and meaning in their work. So the quadruple aim adds a fourth aim, improving the experience of providing care. So according to Leath and his colleagues, the core of workforce engagement is the experience of joy and meaning in the work of healthcare. So that's not synonymous with happiness, that everybody should be happy at work, rather that all members of the workforce have a sense of accomplishment and meaning in their contributions. So by meaning, they're referring to the sense of importance in daily work and that they're making a difference. Their work matters. And by joy, they're referring to the feeling of success and fulfillment that results from meaningful work. So here's a first polling question that I'd like you to respond to. I'm going to get the poll set up here and launch it, but I want to know, have you experienced meaning in your practice as a nurse leader, and have you experienced joy in your practice as a nurse leader? And we'll give about 20 seconds for people to weigh in here. So we can see that nurses have said, or the participants have said that they usually or always have experienced meaning in their practice as a nurse leader, and they've often experienced joy, so sometimes or usually experience joy as well. So I'm sharing those results with you now. Hopefully you can see those. So thanks for that. Okay, so it is something that we know we can experience as nurses to find meaning and joy in our work. So why did these experts talk about joy and meaning? Well, without joy and meaning in work, the workforce can't perform to its full potential. Joy and meaning are generative. They allow the best to be contributed by each person and team as we work toward the triple aim every day. But most importantly, joy and meaning contribute to our well-being and enable us to flourish as people and professionals. So what does it mean to flourish? Well, the online dictionary says that it's to grow or develop in a healthy or vigorous way, especially as the result of a particularly favorable environment. And synonyms would include thrive or prosper, and I love the fact that it comes from the Middle English word meaning to flower or blossom, and wouldn't we all want to be able to blossom or flower in our healthcare work? So human flourishing comes from Martin Seligman. He was a positive psychologist who wrote this book called Flourish, and I would advise that this is, a great read for any of us in nursing who are looking to enhance well-being. But he says that flourishing reflects well-being, which includes positive emotions or joy and meaning. So joy and meaning are built into well-being, which then leads to us being able to flourish. So, well, according to well-being theory, it's a combination of feeling good as well as actually having meaning, good relationships, and accomplishments. And the goal of this theory is to increase human flourishing. Another positive psychologist, Barbara Fredrickson, said it this way: flourishing goes beyond happiness or satisfaction with life. True, people who flourish are happy, but that's not the half of it. Beyond feeling good, they're also doing good, adding value to the world. In other words, they're leading a meaningful life. So when Seligman was creating the well-being theory, he identified this acronym, PERMA, to help people remember the elements of well-being. And the first is positive emotion, which we could equate to happiness or joy or pleasure. The second is engagement, which is being in flow, being absorbed or losing yourself in an activity where you almost lose track of time because you're so focused. And it often means that you're using your strengths and your talents as you engage in the work. Relationships it's about positive relationships and human connection, having people in your life you care about and who care about you and support you. Meaning, which is belonging to or serving something bigger than yourself and being able to make a difference. And then achievement or accomplishment, which is really about pursuing success or mastery or winning. And this acronym, if we take a look at it in our own lives, we could do a self-assessment. How is our well-being? Am I able to recognize that I'm experiencing positive emotions, engagement, relationship, meaning, and achievement? And what Seligman said is that no single one of these is the key to well-being. You really need to have them all, so it's sort of like a bundle. So now we're going to get to another polling question. So would you say that your practice environment supports nurse well-being? All right, well, we're getting a lot of agreement there. So we have our participants saying that they agree or strongly agree that they have practice environments that are supportive of nurses' well-being. Seems when I go back to the slides, it doesn't want to go back that smoothly. All right, so that's good to know. We have some very positive practice environments, but sometimes it's hard to know. I mean, we have our subjective view of whether or not we have those positive practice environments where nurses can flourish, but how do we know if they really are? So there's a few things we use. We often use surveys like our employee engagement surveys or other instruments like the Comprehensive Meaningful Work Scale. Oftentimes we might hear stories of meaningful or joyful moments. We have found, though, that when we started to look into the literature for some evidence on this, there had been very little published about nurses' experiences with meaning and joy. So often when you find that there's very little in the literature, the first thing you do is conduct a qualitative study. So that's what we did. Some colleagues, four of us conducted this study. And we used semi-structured interviews, and we had a sample that we sort of, it was a snowball sampling approach where we would identify a nurse who had had this experience, who would identify another nurse, who would identify another nurse. And so we ended up with 27 U.S. nurses, 20 female, 7 male, varied roles, clinical, administrative roles, educational roles, so a variety of practice settings. The age range was from 31 to 70, so a very broad range of ages and experiences from 2 to 40 plus years. So it was really kind of a broad cross-section of nurses, and in a qualitative study, you don't need large sample size. You need enough until you get to saturation in your themes so that you don't need to conduct any more interviews in order to get the data you need. So we did a narrative analysis to arrive at themes based on these hearing the voices of these nurses. And these are the 4 themes that we came up with. The first is fulfilling purpose. I am a nurse. And I'll get into what each of these means in some quotes to illustrate them. The second one is meaningful connection. The third is impact, or the wow factor. And then we asked nurses what were the contributing things that made it possible for them to experience meaning and joy. And they talked about the practice environment, which actually had 3 sub-themes: team works, leaders model the way, and opportunities to learn and grow. So the first theme, fulfilling purpose, I am a nurse. And what we heard was that meaning and joy comes when the practice experience aligns with the nurse's own values, their sense of identity, and their call to serve. So this quote kind of captures it. It's not just what we do, it's who we are. So several participants verbalized that they'd been called to be a nurse or to serve in alignment with their values and beliefs. Some described a spiritual basis for that. Others described it as just a deep conviction or feeling that they were meant to be nurses. Many described a desire to help others and found nursing to be a means to fulfill that desire or need, and several stated that they could not imagine doing anything else. Nurses also talked about being attracted by the scientific basis for nursing and the need to master the knowledge and skills so they could competently help patients and families. One nurse said, "It took a couple of years to get those competencies to where they were pretty strong. Now I've got my sea legs." Then that allowed the freedom to start having those more meaningful interactions. And another nurse said that, the science was interesting and challenging, but they gained meaning and joy from caring and practicing the art of nursing. Or as you see on the quote here, "I first went into nursing for the science, and I found that it's not the science that brings me joy, but the intimate experiences. I moved from the science to the caring." So here's another polling question for you. Think about why you became a nurse and tell us a little bit about that. So choose all that apply about why you became a nurse. All right, so we have 11 people who have weighed in here, and it looks like the most common reason that people became a nurse is they wanted to make a difference. But you can see that people also said that it aligned with their values or their identity, and then about 50% said they wanted to help people in need, they felt called to the profession, or they loved the science. Okay, thanks for answering that. So the second theme was meaningful connection, and human connection, we found, in relationships enabled nurses to provide care that makes a difference, was meaningful, and helped them to feel joyful about their impact. So as stated by one participant, the fundamental core of our profession is really about relatedness, that relationship that we established, that healing relationship. And I really loved this beautiful quote from one of our participants. It's about this magical spiritual connection that you have with another person, this existential feeling that you gain when it's the middle of the night, you're alone, a patient's in distress, and you connect with that person. For just a moment, you are that connection. You are the person that comforts them, and there's nothing else in this world that can match that feeling. And that's really the heart and soul of nursing. So this was pretty characteristic of what we heard from nurses about how meaningful it was to make that connection with patients and families. But nurses also describe meaningful connections and relationships with other nurses or students and their colleagues. So one said, meaning for me in nursing has really been found in not only my patients, but in my relationships with my colleagues. And another one who was now an educator and was working with students said, I've really gotten a little bit from a whole lot of people and sewn them together in this tapestry that I call my nurse life. And I'm really trying to give that back to the students. I'm trying to put my old head on their young shoulders, and they respond, and that's pretty meaningful. So really, not only important to connect with patients and families, but also with colleagues and students. So nurses described using the art of nursing to individualize care based on getting to know the person as a person, respecting their individuality and their human dignity. So they described meaning and joy as they creatively and compassionately responded to unique physical, emotional, and spiritual needs. So one nurse shared, finding out who they are as an individual, that was very meaningful to me. It actually helped me to tailor care to what I can anticipate their needs might be or their preferences. And here's a quote from another nurse that you can see on the screen here. What makes me want to keep coming to work in the morning is those moments I'm able to have with my patient or my family member, just finding their humanity. I really appreciate those small moments that I'm able to get to know who my patient is, who the family is that's supporting them, and that's what makes it all seem the more worthwhile to me to have that connection with them and maybe impact their life in some way beyond the physical care that I'm providing as a nurse. So nurses felt privileged and honored and found meaning in being present with people in their most intimate and vulnerable moments. And they valued time to just be with patients and families and the power of human touch. So again, a polling question for you. One sec. So in your nursing practice, have you been able to experience a meaningful connection with patients and their families or with colleagues and students? Do little things that make a big difference for someone and tailor care based on knowing who the patient and family are as people. Okay. So here we've seen that you all have had many of these experiences yourselves, similar to what our participants shared with us during the interviews. Meaningful connection with patients and families and doing the little things that make a big difference. Okay. So the ability to have a positive impact on colleagues is really important, but also when we're having, I'm going to just go back for 1 second here to thinking about our impact on patients and families and communities. So sorry about that. So in reflecting on moments of meaning and joy, nurses describe the significance of seeing their impact on patients and families or colleagues. Several used the word wow to indicate how powerful it was to be able to make a difference for others. They reflected on lots of different moments, gestures of gratitude from others, like patients or families, or from staff, positive clinical and functional outcomes, like just being able to see somebody coming back, walking, talking, able to communicate their thanks. Peaceful deaths were also meaningful moments and very impactful, and their ability to reduce suffering. And nurses talked about the wow of developing as a nurse through their interactions with patients and families. So all of that led to an ability to make a difference or have a positive impact and was a source not only of meaning, but of joy. And this is where we really saw the joy come out, is when people saw the difference that they were able to make. And it wasn't only with patients and families, it was with colleagues too, a significant source of joy. So one nurse described, for me personally, to hear from colleagues I think is really tremendous because they know what you do, and that's where you want to be respected and know that you're valued and that you bring value to people with what you're doing. Participants also shared their story of impact on students. So one nurse educator said, the pride and the joy on that student's face was definitely a moment of joy for me. So I thought, wow, there are a lot of people who've influenced my life as mentors, so that's the role I'm enjoying playing now with fellow nurses. Nurses described the joy of supporting new nurses, empowering fellow nurses through shared governance or magnet designation, and helping them to realize their potential. Leaders found joy in positively influencing nurses. And actually, we're doing a study now on nurse managers and their experiences of meaning and joy, and this is exactly what we're hearing from them, is that this is where they get their joy, is in positively influencing nurses to really create the conditions where nurses can have much more positive experiences through the impact of their leaders. The other thing that we found in this study is that we were able to talk to some really seasoned leaders who had joy in seeing the lasting impact that they've been able to have on the organization or on the profession, and that impact was renewable and sustainable over time. So when we think about some of the work we're doing in ACNL or that we're doing as California nurse leaders in our own practices, really we have the opportunity to make a lasting wow that can really bring us meaning and joy in our leadership practice. So here we'll just do another poll. So, have you in your practice been thanked by patients or families, seen a difference based on your contributions, been thanked by colleagues or a student, been appreciated or recognized for your work, and experienced joy based on the impact you've made? Well, that's really great to see that you all are getting recognition and appreciation for the things that you have been doing as a leader or in your practice. But really, so often nurse leaders do not get recognized or appreciated for their work. So I'm glad to see that you have been. It's really important because we are people too, and we need that the same way everybody else does. So when we asked nurses, okay, great, you've had these experiences of meaning and joy, what were some of the things that contributed to that or made that possible? And the practice environment and the people in it factored significantly into nurses' experiences of meaning and joy. The practice environments where creativity and innovation were fostered allowed the nurse to practice the art of nursing. And nurses described the value of autonomy, to be able to make decisions and provide what the patient needed, the individual patient. Nurses appreciated environments where their voice and contributions were valued and where infrastructure like shared governance engaged them in shared decision-making. So several spontaneously described how magnet organizations contributed to their ability to experience meaning and joy in their practice. And that was an unexpected finding to hear that being spontaneously vocalized by our participants. So here's someone that captured it kind of succinctly. When you ask about joy and meaning, it just brings to mind times when I've had a work environment when it felt supportive and collegial, where I'm learning something and gaining some new insights into what is possible, and where there's some kind of support for creative thinking and taking risks. So that really captures that healthy work environment that we have learned about with that framework from AACN, how we can create the environment where people can experience this, which really creates the conditions then for them to experience meaning and joy as well. So one of the sub-themes that came out of the practice environment theme was team works. So colleagues and peers in the practice environment are a significant source of meaning and joy. They provide support, they mentor, they understand, and they take action when needed. They often listened and consoled or coached and challenged. They got it, especially when times were tough. So practice environments with healthy teamwork and strong collegial relationships where nurses are valued and respected enable them to make meaningful contributions. One nurse participant described the positive impact of strong interprofessional relationships where rounds don't go on without me. So the nurses feel in that environment very supported and like their input is so valued that rounds don't start without them. And the commitment to teamwork and collaboration is a source of inspiration for nurses as well as the support for meaningful practice. But we also heard from nurses during these interviews is that not all team members were supportive, and nurses described negative experiences from which they learned as well. This included not being accepted by peers in a specialty practice or feeling unappreciated by peers or leaders. These experiences underscore the importance of healthy, respectful teamwork and interaction for meaning and joy in nursing practice. The second sub-theme was about leaders. Leaders who were good role models on their units and who shared their knowledge as well as their love and joy in what they were doing were catalysts for meaningful experiences. Nurse leaders who appreciated and recognized nurses contributed to their experiences of meaning and joy. One nurse said, "People's achievements are so celebrated here, which is so nice. The work you put in is valued, and I think that's all any of us ask for, is to have our effort be valued." So nurse leaders who listened and engaged nurses in reflection and shared decision-making were really appreciated by nurses. So here's one quote that sort of sums this up. I mean, we've really made some huge improvements in how nursing is valued in this facility. They've come to see the value in education and in certification and how nurses are the people that are there all the time taking care of patients at the bedside and how much we can be involved with policy. Our shared governance committees, they're great here. ICU, we have a unit-based council that is particularly active, and we have a lot of governance committees for a lot of different things. It's so nice to be involved in how the hospital works. It's a good thing. So this, these kinds of situations or conditions really allow nurses to experience meaning in their practice, in the practice environment. The other thing that was a sub-theme came out strongly from a lot of the nurses we interviewed was having opportunities for learning and growth. Nurses were appreciative of those opportunities to experience different things. And they learned from those experiences and from one another and from other team members. They described the many ways they grew as people and professionals through the practice of nursing. So here's a quote here from one of the nurses. One of the things that's unique about nursing is that we can continue to grow and develop and learn and become over the course of our career. And there's no limit on the opportunities or choices we can make in this profession and still be a member. And that's a really beautiful reflection on all the opportunities we have in the profession of nursing. Another nurse participant said, nursing has enriched my life. It's made me a better problem solver. It's added to my empathy. It's really enriched my life, and I think my satisfaction comes from my awareness that I'm doing meaningful work. So one more polling question for you. In your practice environment, nurses support each other, interprofessional teams work well together, you're able to contribute to decisions that affect your work, you have a leader who's interested in you and helps you grow, and you have opportunities for learning. All right, so thanks for participating in the poll. It looks like 100% say they're able to contribute to decisions that affect your work. And that's really great in your leadership role so that you have that kind of leadership autonomy. It also reflects that nurses support each other, and you have a leader who's interested in you and helping you to grow. I think it looks like where we have the most opportunity in our practice environment is around interprofessional teams working together. Oh, I don't know if I shared that, so if you guys could see that. So hopefully you can see that now. So that was our last polling question. So now what I want to spend some time is on what we can do to promote meaning and joy for nurses. As leaders, we want to really create the conditions where nurses can experience this in their daily practice. But what we learned as we looked into this was that there's some preconditions for joy and meaning. And again, it was Lucian Leape and the Institute for Patient and the Lucian Leape Institute and the National Patient Safety Foundation who did the work, and they published a white paper that said the precondition for joy and meaning is to ensure that the workforce has physical and psychological freedom from harm, neglect, and disrespect. So for a health system that's aspiring to the triple aim, fulfilling this precondition must be a non-negotiable, enduring property of the system, and everyone has to own it. It's the role of leaders and every member of the team to work on keeping each other safe and advocating for what is needed for safety. I'm sure you can all think of initiatives in your organizations to increase both physical and psychological safety. So cultural freedom from physical and psychological harm is the right thing to do, and it's smart economics because unsafe and toxic environments impose real costs on the organization, our employees, physicians, patients, and ultimately the entire population. So for an organization that's focused on enabling joy and meaning in work and pursuit of the triple aim, we need to embody the shared core values of mutual respect and civility, transparency and truth-telling, and the safety of the workforce. And living these shared values together will help us find joy and meaning in the challenging work that we do. And the last bullet here you can see is that another precondition is recognition of the work and accomplishments of the individuals and teams. We need to do that regularly and with high visibility, not just for individuals, and not just during Nurses Week or during Daisy Awards, but all the time. It needs to be something that we need to be very intentional and deliberate about and do it at a regular frequency. So, thinking about the themes that came up, we want to think about what can we do as leaders, what behaviors can we adopt or interventions that can help nurses to find joy in their work. Well, just as we try to get to know each patient as a person so that we can deliver individualized, tailored care to them that really meets their needs and their goals, we need to do that same thing with our nurses. And sometimes with our large spans of control, it can be hard to do, but to the extent possible, it's best to get to know each nurse as a person. And one way to do that is to ask them why they chose nursing, what brought them to the profession in the first place. And you'll start to get those stories that we heard when we interviewed people. And you get to know what each person finds meaningful and what brings them joy. The other thing to do is listen in those stories so that when you are out there with your nurses in your leadership rounds, you know that you can help them connect the dots between what they're doing in their practice today and their call to be a nurse or what they find meaningful. So sometimes it's important for us to be able to point those things out to people and help them connect the dots between their practice and why they were called to be a nurse in the first place. And you'll see a lot of faces light up and a lot of smiles when you start to help them do that. The third thing is to create opportunities for sharing stories of meaning and joy. And don't forget to share your own experiences. Some of what we've tried to do here is start a meeting with somebody sharing a really meaningful moment over the last week or since the last time you met. And through that, you start to really hear nurses talk about the things that really struck them, and when they were able to do something that was perceived as little for somebody and that was really powerful. In fact, in the end, it brought them a lot of meaning or brought them a lot of joy. So to get our nurses to be sharing their stories, but also to share our own, because we have opportunities to experience this in our daily practice, not only with other nurses, but sometimes with our patients and families as well. The fourth thing is to really co-create a practice environment that values and supports both the science and the art of nursing. And you'll see in some of my recommendations that I make over the next several slides is really this emphasis on co-creating. We as nurse leaders do not need to feel like we need to do all the heavy lifting, that we're the ones that have to create the practice environment. The nurses are in the practice environment with us, as are our interprofessional colleagues. So it's really kind of working together with our shared governance structures or our unit practice councils or in our staff meetings. Hey guys, what can we do that appreciates both the science and the art of nursing? So those stories of tailoring and individualizing care, but also the evidence-based practice differences that we're making, like around the difference in outcomes we're able to make when we implement an evidence-based practice change that's really successful. So it's really about appreciating both in our practice environment. Sometimes we get so hung up on the metrics that we forget to value the art pieces of nursing. So those are a few suggestions there. When thinking about how do we create the conditions for nurses to experience more meaningful connection, it's really about establishing therapeutic relationships and individualizing care. So how do we, with our teams, co-design practices that allow nurses to spend more time with patients and families, establishing those relationships and individualizing care? So some of the things that we have done here at my organization are to spend 5 minutes at the beginning of the shift, and people have given this all different kinds of names, like commit to sit or take 5, different things like that. But just that time when you're sitting down eye to eye, knee to knee with patients, or a chair at the bedside, to just connect with them on what their priorities are for the day, what would the day look like if it were a success, and getting to know them as people, and what's their life like outside of here. So that's the kind of thing that we need to see if we can intentionally build into the day for nurses to be able to feel like they can spend that time and not get behind on their tasks that they have to accomplish. The other thing that this allows is for nurses to have the time and space to do the little things that make a difference for patients and families. And sometimes the rest of our care team can help with that too. I was meeting with some care partners, our nursing assistants yesterday, and just talking about the powerful role they play in patient comfort and in just, a warm blanket, a cup of coffee or tea, and for a family member, just the little things that let them know that we see them as fellow human beings and that we're trying to make a difference that is meaningful for them through just the caring for them. And then in that co-creation, we're also working on our environment where nurses can make meaningful connections with one another and members of the interprofessional team. I was just looking at a white paper from Press Ganey recently where they found that a key factor in nurse engagement is really an RN to RN teamwork and communication. So how do we create the conditions where nurses can make those meaningful connections and support one another? Sometimes it's potluck lunches or other meals. Commensality is the act of breaking bread together, and that is one of the strategies for really helping people form bonds, get to know each other culturally. What kinds of foods do you like? What kinds of foods are important to you in your culture and your family? So there's lots of ways that we can work together. And again, our councils are a great resource to collaborate with to create the care environment where nurses can make meaningful connections with one another as well as other members of the healthcare team. Impact the wow factor is, some of the things that we can do here are making sure we have processes for peer and patient family recognition and appreciation. So a lot of us have DAISY awards where patients and families or peers can write out, recognition for extraordinary care in the course of an ordinary day. But also some places will have, star awards or other kinds of a whiteboard where you can post things, just kudos or thanks. And it's so important to figure out what's going to be meaningful to your team to have peer recognition go on and for them to get patient and family recognition. Some of the ways, too, that it enables you to get the patient family recognition is to have your patient family advisory committees share in recognizing and appreciating staff, or create ways where patients and families can come back after they've healed and moved on to another level of health and well-being, come back and share their appreciation and their success stories with staff. Because so often I had one PICU nurse tell the story of a little girl she took care of, and the girl was pretty much in a coma the whole time she was taking care of her. And by the time she was ready to go on to the next level of care, the nurse wasn't caring for her anymore. But a few months later, that patient and family came back, and the child got up out of her wheelchair and walked and went up to the nurse and said, my mom tells me that you took really good care of me while I was really sick, and I just wanted to come back and say thank you. And that nurse's jaw just dropped, thinking about, holy cow, this is a really wow moment for me, because I had no idea that this little girl had made these kinds of gains and that my care had made that kind of contribution to her success story. So it's really, a really important thing for us to find ways to help patients and families come back and do that. NICUs are pretty good at that. Oftentimes they'll have the graduates come back and share in their success stories. Another way is to make sure that we're consistently celebrating meaningful contributions, and that can be, again, in monthly staff meetings or council meetings or boards, but we're being consistent about it and not having it just be very haphazard and something that we don't get around to because it's on the bottom of our list. And some of these recognitions can reinforce or reward things that we're trying to cultivate in our nurses, like creativity and innovation and autonomy and risk-taking, and making sure that we're recognizing people who stick their necks out a little bit and do something that isn't always the safe, and I don't mean in terms of patient safety, but the safe path. So we're reinforcing that those are important, and they not only make good contributions, but they help nurses to find meaning and joy in their practice as well. So lots of work that has been done out there on healthy practice environments, and so really I found that the AACN framework for healthy work environments is really such a great framework for us all. And one of those key components is authentic leadership. So, it's really important that we as leaders look at our role in that. But how do we create opportunities for collaboration? Sometimes it's the nurse manager and the medical director of that unit working together to figure out how are we going to create better rounding processes so that there's more collaboration in that, or team training, like team steps training together. So it's really an important partnership that two disciplines have at the leadership level for the units or the department that will then role model that for others and set up opportunities for better collaboration. Obviously, our shared decision-making structures to engage and empower nurses, giving them opportunities for voice, and then making sure we listen. Listening and asking good questions. There's lots of models out there about how much time we should spend listening versus talking as leaders, and that's so important in creating the practice environment where nurses feel heard and that they're able to make strong contributions. And then last but not least, obviously, is creating opportunities for education and professional development and making sure that you're an advocate for that in your organization to make sure all of us are getting the development opportunities that we need. So a lot of what we found in our interviews and through our qualitative study aligns with the work that the IHI has done and the framework that they've recently published for improving joy in work. So I think you will find this white paper a very helpful resource as you look at how you can set up the practice conditions in your organization to enable nurses to find meaning and joy in their work. So before we conclude, I want to just take a few minutes to think about you, or have you think about you and what you can do for your own well-being, because it's so important that you take care of you so that then you can really fully participate in creating or co-creating the conditions in your practice environment that will allow nurses to thrive and flourish and allow you to flourish as well. So what can you do? So one of the things that we have made a commitment to here recently in my organization is really looking at strengths and strengths-based leadership. There are a number of ways and there are a number of vehicles that you can use, but Strength Finders is one that we've been using, but there's also this free self-assessment found on www.AuthenticHappiness.org, which comes out of Seligman's work. But it's really about your signature strengths, and it feels like the real you when you're using them. It's exciting. You have a fast learning curve, and it's really not only invigorating, but helps you to feel joy when you're able to use your strengths rather than focus in on your weaknesses. I also, there's a lot of evidence out there now to support gratitude practices and to really have gratitude reshape the way you're looking at the world. And there are a lot of direct correlations to wellness or well-being. And it really is a shift in our worldview oriented toward noticing and appreciating the positive in life. And a lot of what the science has shown is that when we have feelings of gratitude, there's a release of positive endorphins throughout the body, which contributes to our health. So dopamine, serotonin, oxytocin, endorphins, all of that, creating a sense of feeling of happiness or well-being. And the studies have shown that people who have a gratitude practice report that they have greater optimism, they feel better about their lives, they tend to exercise more, they have fewer doctor visits, they sleep better. Wouldn't that be great? They have better coping skills, lower levels of stress, and less depression. So it sounds like something that would really be a great contributor to our own well-being if we engaged in that practice. One that I like to do every night before I go to bed is the 3 blessings exercise, or what went well exercise. So often at the end of the day, we are beating ourselves up about the things that we didn't get done, or what we didn't say correctly, or what we wish we would have said that we didn't say. So there's lots of things that do go well during the course of the day, and it's important to reflect on those, what went well, and why they went well, because oftentimes it's because you were using your strengths or you were engaged in something that had allowed you to have meaningful connection. There are a lot of reasons why those things go well. And it's important to think about that and give yourselves credit and pat on the back for why they went well, and you have a lot to do with that. So remember to give thanks. It's a very healthy thing. The other thing that I read recently is about starting your day with gratitude for, whatever it is, and because then that gets you set off on a positive foot for the day. So again, a practice that I am trying to incorporate to enhance my own well-being. The other thing that's a very important leadership practice is reflection, and we know that we should do this as leaders to make sure that we're learning as we experience both failures and successes. But the beautiful thing about reflecting on past significant achievements or the positive, it allows the brain to relive that experience. So our brain has trouble telling the difference between what's real and what's imagined, so it produces serotonin in both cases. So it's very positive. Even when you're recalling something positive that happened during the course of the day, that serotonin release is a very healthy thing. And it's really about savoring, because savoring increases the intensity and duration of positive emotions. So make time to reflect on the positive, and oftentimes it's helpful to do that in a journal, because simply the act of writing it down is part of that savoring process and part of helping that serotonin release. The other thing, in speaking of not beating ourselves up, is self-compassion. And I've shared this poem or reflection with a number of nurses, and it's called Me, Myself. I commit to me, myself today. I vow to listen to and follow and believe in my goodness, to recognize my strength and wield it with the added power of compassion, to know my heart and trust it and not turn to outside expectations to feed it, but rather to turn to my own inner guidance to lead me, to know that I am the person I want to be and to work to uncover more of my beauty daily, and to be gentle with myself when I slip, loving myself even in the darkness. To me, myself, I give my love, and it is from me, myself, my love is returned. And it may feel a little, hokey to say this out loud or to think it, but it really is the act of self-compassion, being as good to ourselves and gentle with ourselves as we would to one of our loved ones. We would never say to one of our loved ones some of the things that we say to ourselves in our own self-talk. So it's a very important thing to be aware of and to work on. Obviously, we talked a little bit about building positive relationships in your personal and professional life. Very, very important. And, it's something I find I have to remind myself and others all the time. I was at a chapter meeting the other night, and there was a discussion about incivility and about just acts of kindness, and how so often we have to remind people and ourselves to just be kind. So there's a lot of science, again, behind building positive relationships and even hugging. Positive relationships release oxytocin, which then creates more intimacy, trust, and strengthens relationships. So deliver those acts of kindness and give yourself the gift of time using your strengths, because that'll help you to be more positive in your relationships, and then show you care and appreciate others. We talked about celebrating, and a lot of us do that really well. Others of us need to allow ourselves to make a big deal. Celebrate those meaningful contributions, as I mentioned earlier, but not only for our clinical nurses, but for ourselves as leaders. So often leaders do not get recognized and have those opportunities to celebrate their leadership accomplishments. So, in closing, together we can create the conditions for flourishing as nurse leaders, for ourselves and for our colleagues. And here is a partial bib, some resources for you as you think about creating the conditions for joy and meaning in your practice. And you'll see here the results of our study as the third bullet there. It's a narrative analysis of nurses' experiences with meaning and joy in their nursing practice. We published in Nursing Administration Quarterly last year. So with that, I will have Jacob open up for questions.
If you have any questions, please feel free to type them into the chat or the Q&A section, or you can click the raise hand button and one of us will call on you.
Jacob, if I stop sharing, will I see the questions?
Yes, you'll see them.
Oh, I'm going to go to that. Okay. Thank you, Nancy. Nancy, the work that you have done and that the committee has done on healthy work environments is really amazing, and I want to thank you for all of that, and for AACN in creating the framework and the measurement tools for us to be able to measure how healthy our work environments are. I think is very powerful, and can help us to really reflect on a lot of these aspects of our practice environments that can not only create healthy work environments, but contribute to nurses' experiences of meaning and joy, or the quadruple aim. Well, it doesn't look like there are any other questions, so should we conclude?